Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for this really important webinar. My name is Sophia. I'm the Institute Director for FIBA's education program, our executive education. And it is my pleasure today to begin the webinar by introducing the title and also our cyber expert. So first of all, this webinar is Regulators and Cybersecurity Audits. This is a way for you to examine your cybersecurity programs and see if you're truly ready for the examiners to come and for you to present all of your information in terms of cybersecurity. So we're going to move forward to the next slide, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter. So I'm here with Mauricio, and I don't ever say his last name correctly. So Angée. So I'm going to explain a little bit about Mauricio's background, just to summarize the slide that you see. And for more detailed information, you can read it. He's a certified information system security professional. He has, again, over 25 years of experience, and he's worked in several sectors, including banking, healthcare, hospitality, and even government entities. The focus of his career has mostly been in cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, and risk management. Currently, he is serving as the Chief Information Security Officer at Mount Sinai Medical Center. He's also an adjunct professor at the Florida International University. And he is known as the top tier security professional. He was even awarded by the EC Council in 2013 as the Chief Information Security Officer of the Year. For more information, you can look at the detailed paragraph that gives you information about places that he's worked. And I'd like to also give him a special welcome because he is a cybersecurity expert in the field. FIBA has recognized this, and we are fortunate enough to be working with him as our course developer and instructor for our Cybersecurity for Financial Institutions course. So just to summarize, and you'll learn a little bit more about the program that he has developed with one of his colleagues, Sergio Piñon. The FIBA and FIU Cybersecurity for Financial Institutions is a one-day program which will be offered on June 28th here at our FIBA office in Miami. And it'll basically arm you with the skills that are needed to detect, prevent, and respond to cyber threats in financial institutions. So it's basically a combination of timely, relevant curriculum content, practical real-world exercises, and the course will position you at the forefront of a rapidly changing cybersecurity landscape. Mauricio will explain a little bit more about the program since he's the one who's developed it and will be teaching it. And without further ado, a warm welcome to Mauricio as he begins the presentation today.
Thank you, Sophia. Good afternoon. Appreciate it. That was a great introduction. So let me start. I like to always start, even I'm teaching, my classes to my students. I really love to start presentations by setting the stage. There's no surprise to anybody, and if you're in this industry or in any place that you connect to the internet, how how many incidents and how many breaches get published every single day. As a matter of fact, I was talking to one of our colleagues the other day is if I could take all the information about breaches from 2016 to now, we could probably prove that there is a breach almost every other day, and for the past, it's consistent for the past 2 years. So setting the stage, as I said before, there has been so many breaches. The news, you remember the Equifax, who doesn't? But so over 2 billion, in this impact the financial industry, in over 2 billion, 4.5 minutes average loss per incident. And plan expenses. This is something that we talked about in the course during the class, because it's something that we as security professionals, inundated with day-to-day work, inundated with audits, documentation, et cetera, we tend to forget is how much is the cost of an unplanned issue or breach. You have to get forensic analysis. You have to start working on the notification to the regulator and also to consumers. And the remediation is also a big task that is a big, big bill that we are faced with. Then we have the reputational risk, the loss of customer or accounts closed due to breaches. And we can tell you that even though you cannot close an account in Expedia when this breach happened, it has been massive, and probably a lot of the banks are seeing or will start seeing a lot of the breach impact on their banking and industry is the customer's confidence, and that's something that the regulator looks at every time these audits come about. Is they look at the confidence, how confident are the customers to continue doing business with the bank. So every time there is a breach, there's concerns of how many people are going to close accounts or customers lost. And finally, and last but not least, is regulatory risks, the fines and the sanctions that includes all the impact of a breach. And it shouldn't be a surprise that when we have a breach or when there is a breach in a company or organization, banking, financial, the regulators are interested to know what controls failed and an action plan that is required to prove and show that you have all the intentions to mitigate the risk and to fix all these issues that were identified as a result of the breach. So I hate to call it hackers. I've been told by a lot of people that they lately we've been tagging these, as we know, hackers are cyber criminals. But let me give you some facts about these cyber criminals. The maximum time to penetrate a system is 6 hours. So I want to make sure, yes, I said that. It's 6 hours. You all know, and if you don't know, do a little bit of research. The tools are available now. If you Google malware, if you Google ransomware, if you Google tools to attack, they're readily available. They're for lease. You can rent them for a period of time, number, location, geolocation, the market. So once you have the tools, it only takes 6 hours. Phishing email is one example that these cyber criminals are taking now to penetrate, escalate privileges, and hit with ransomware or other type of attacks. When they ask how often they encounter systems they could not crack, and this is a survey, by the way, during the presentation that we're gonna do here during the course of the day that we're gonna have in June 26th, is when asked how long, if you encounter a system that you could not crack or breach, they said only 9%. 9% of these cyber criminals said never. So put it in perspective. This 9% of the time, 9% of the criminals said they never encountered a system they could not penetrate. 53% said sometimes, 22% said rarely, and 16% said they often face issues like this. But the main idea here is that our systems are vulnerable, and if they are, they're gonna find a way in. The case in point, the latest news now that we're talking about breaches is the city of Atlanta got hit with ransomware. And now that the details of the investigation are coming about, it's very concerning to us as a security professionals. They did not use a phishing email at this time. They performed some reconnaissance of, they've been doing this for a while on government institutions and organizations. And when they find systems that are vulnerable, which is the case on the city of Atlanta, there was an unpatched system outside the firewall. And when they looked at the credentials is a username and a password. Usually, they found out the password was default password, and the word password was the actual password, all lowercase. They didn't have to do much work. They had access to this server. It was an FTP server, and from there on, they had access to the network to plant and weaponize that ransomware. So here goes to show you that sometimes, and most of the times, it's a misconfigured system and not really requires a lot of work from the cyber criminal side. More facts on this is 40% said that phishing was their favorite method. 40% is a high number. Methods of attack is easy. We understand and we know a lot of research done in this area that our users, our employees, the individuals working in our institutions are what some researchers call the weakest link. And if we don't have awareness, security awareness programs that are strong and continuous, it's not once a year, it's not every quarter. This has to be a continuous effort because these cyber criminals saying 40% of the time they rather use this method than any other method. It's just one click. 43% said that they use social engineering, and this is the case, and we're going to see a case study here during our class, is on how they're collecting social engineering, and it's fascinating to understand that social networks have become this tool that we as consumers, and the bad guys are using to collect information on us, and they really can get a lot of information and they can target individuals like that. Moving on, 20% of the hackers took less than 2 hours to extract data, not data, but data once they got in. Only 2% of hackers found antivirus to be an obstruct. Antivirus is something that is required. We have to have it. But the savvy guys, the people who really know how to penetrate the systems, they disguise the attack as being part of the system, a program running perhaps, or they usually, and what we see a lot of the times when we do investigations, the antivirus gets disabled so they don't get detected. Next will be the biggest hurdle was the endpoint security, and to this end is layer security approach, in which I'm going to talk about in a subsequent uh, uh, slide here. Approximately 1,022 breaches occurred during 2016. That was an increase of 30% from 2015. And the numbers from 2017 have been already disclosed, which has been an increase of 40% according to various reports that I've read, including the Verizon report and the Semantic Security report. So in essence, just to put this in perspective, um, we're not, they're winning. They're getting a lot of information. They got the tools and they got the time, and we need to be on top of these issues. Understand one of the things I've been doing internally with my team in every place I go and speak is it's a good practice. If you can take this as a takeaway from today's webinar, I want to share with you because I think it's important that as we find tools or processes to enhance our posture, it's important to share. So every time there is a breach, significant breach in the news, or that we get notification from the FBI or from our security companies, we internally take the breach and dissect it, how it happened, what was the tool used, what was the weakness, how was the attack, and we internally take that and start checking our systems against this breach. It's a great way to take a checklist of how the Atlanta ransomware attack happened, and so do an assessment, an inventory of your servers outside the firewall. Look at the patch level, change the password and make them complex. Take this opportunity of this breach and turn it into an advantage for you and your organizations. Just don't read the news and say, oh yeah, they got attacked. Take it, dissect it, I understand it, and take actions to avoid being the next victim. um, the next slide is, as I said before, impact to financial industry and institutions. We chose, we went over this. We have these breaches that has, happened every day, as I said, and some of them are here. I have an interesting metrics that have been collecting, and you're gonna see that in the presentation, and not today, but during the course in June, and is and I have each of the breaches that have happened in the last 2 years, and what was the cause of the breach, and from 2016 to 2017 there was a jump from the the old way of attacking, which was escalation of privilege or brute force attacks, or what those attacks. And now most of the breaches in 2017, actually, I would venture to say 95 of the breaches, 95% last year, were as a result of phishing attacks. So, it's another way of seeing what's going on. So let me tell you what happened on this Equifax, that what went wrong, and we're gonna dissect this one. And as I said before, take the time to kind of take notes and see what are we doing to avoid becoming the victim of this type of attacks. So in total, 143 million records were exposed. This is what initially was said to us, but there was as you know, the news last month was another report, that what they initially reported was not what what was. After investigation, they found out that there were more records exposed than what initially reported. So in as a whole, and as the news and the day of the news came out, 143 million records, which included social security number, name, email, phone numbers, and as a street address. Everything perfect for a identity theft case, or impersonation or fraud. 400,000 credit cards and debit cards. And so I have a lot of people asking me, Equifax with credit cards and debit cards, what do you mean? Well, they offer services, and one of their services they offer is credit monitoring. And this is ironic. Credit monitoring, they collect data, they collect your credit card because we have to pay monthly if you're a customer, or annually. And that database was also extracted, which is debit credit cards, in addition to the name, last name, and other information. As a result, the CIO and the Chief Information Security Officer at Equifax retired, and we all know what that means in big organizations. The board of directors were not happy, and they retired. And months later, the CEO, Richard Smith, also left the company. So every time there is a breach, the United States government and the U.S. Senate demanded answers. Actually, were heated debates. I used to watch those on C-SPAN, on what kind of questions they were asking these board members. Actually, the CEO had to go and face him. Some of the compliance people attended this meeting, and usually for the U.S. Senate is more of a what security practices they have and what failed, and what was the issue, and why we keep on doing the same thing over and over, and who's paying attention to this. And so when they asked what happened to this in this bridge, and they explained, they being the Equifax executives, 2 month old patches, meaning they weren't patching, but there was a window where they didn't patch for 2 months. This is concerning. If we're not patching today, uh, often, and often is probably every month, if not often than that, we are not ahead of the game, we're behind. And this is another example of a process that failed, or what failed internally. Who knew about this? Who's making the decisions? Who's accepting the risk? To me, these are questions that I would have asked. What are your practices on patching? And so, what are penalties? So, I don't know if you recall this, but days after this Equifax hack was announced, Equifax put together a website that responds to consumers, and that website had a button on the right side corner. I don't know if it's still there, where you clicked, and it will take you to find out if you, as a consumer, if your record was compromised. Well, as bad publicity for Equifax, a few days later, we in the security world were, found out that that link was compromised as well. It was redirecting people to phishing site, very bad for Equifax. So these things happen, and it's part of doing business. It's part of how we look at security these days. So what we expect from this hack and the risk is the arise in identity theft, uh, financial fraud, but also insurance and income tax. I haven't seen the statistics from the IRS yet, um, regarding the amount of fraud that they caught this year as a result, potentially as a result of Equifax. But it will be interesting to look at that, is to see if we can correlate the data between the Equifax compromise breach and the tax returns fraud. And also, again, one more time, big bad reputational risk. So I wonder, and this is kind of a joke, but I wonder if Equifax is still offering 2-year credit monitoring to all these customers, and the answer is yes. So it's kind of ironic as well. Accenture, another compromise that happened last year in September, where cybercriminals gain access to the cloud services as a result of misconfigured server, and they were able to exploit a failure to patch that was 2 months old, meaning they were behind also in patches. So here is one of these big, huge cloud service providers in a big name, in a big, name. I mean it, because they are recognized and known for their services, and a misconfigured. So let's dissect this one too. So when you get together with your teams, when as you learn, is what do you mean misconfigure? And that was a question I had, and I went and read the forensic report, the one that they provide externally to publicly. And so what it means is a network administrator, some of their administrator, they have these guidelines to configure servers and devices and security and firewall. Somebody failed to validate the configuration before putting it in production. So another lesson learned, do you have dual control, somebody implementing the control and somebody validating it? Do you have a QA at your organizations, that somebody is doing the build, or doing the programming, and put it stage it to security tests and other type of tests to validate that the code doesn't have, or whatever we're putting in production is not vulnerable. I bet you, I know Accenture for many years. I can attest. I actually worked together with these teams in a few years ago. The top-notch engineers, somebody dropped the ball, and this is as a consequence of that. So for Amazon servers open to the public, remember, Accenture provides services for Amazon. 137 gigabytes of data was compromised. 40,000 passwords were stored, in majority in plain text. The secret decryption keys were also compromised. So this was massive. Still an investigation. As of today, we haven't heard anything else. So we're not sure about what happened to leadership, who retires or who left, but probably in the news if it's already out there. Identity theft, system compromise, and reputational risk are the impact and the risk to this. So I gave you that. That's the landscape. That's two of the major, not counting with what happened with Facebook the other day. And I want to make a pause before we go to cybersecurity regulations, because a lot of people have asked me on the blogs and my blogs if the Facebook was a breach. And I just want to make clear that we all understand, because I have to explain this over and over again. The Cambridge Analytica and the Facebook issue was not a hack, it's not a breach. As a matter of fact, they had an agreement. And what happened is, if you don't know what happened, if you read the news a little bit and get into it, is Cambridge Analytica was collecting users surveys. It's just a survey that the users used to. It's collecting sentiment. How do you feel today? Do you like the sky? How's the weather in Miami, Florida? And they show you a picture of a relative, and they ask you to yes or no. So after they saw that these things were working and people were receptive and people were just clicking on every single survey that they have, the campaign of presidential campaign played a big role on this one when they were collecting some of behaviors from users. They started collecting what people in Facebook or the users were saying about certain candidates, left, right. So that gave them enough information to start doing some data analytics and come up with some information. So that led to a whistleblower from the company that said that they were collecting information that they were not supposed to collect. You know the rest. Fast forward to today. There was an announcement Facebook made on today's Wednesday, on Monday or over the weekend, that they canceled 24 contracts with other companies that were doing kind of the same analytics using Facebook. Remember, Facebook is the biggest social media platform there is. There's nothing close to them. So this is hurting the businesses. It's hurting Facebook. So privacy now plays a big role. Not only breaches, but now privacy issues also come to play. So moving on to, I wanted to put it out there because it's important that we understand the difference between a breach, privacy issues that arise from these breaches. This slide is interesting for those of you who are on this webinar. I try to put it in perspective is dates and times and what has been done by the United States government when it comes to cybersecurity. So let me tell you, in 2017, Presidential Order 13800, the Cybersecurity of Federal Networks and Critical Infrastructure was signed by President Trump. Before that, President Obama was very active during his term, and he was doing a lot of presidential. I really saw an improvement on the cybersecurity regulations during that period. But we cannot forget that President W. Bush was also very a key in the establishing cybersecurity regulations in the United States. So some of the ones that we remember, we probably recited over and over again. I remember being in finance sector when I was at the bank. 13636, improving critical infrastructure. If you don't know this, it's worth that you understand that 13636 is where this presidential order gave birth to what we know today as the cybersecurity framework that regulators are using today, because this is what the regulators are started asking for. The cybersecurity risk assessments is as a result of 13636. So 13691, promoting private sector in public sector information sharing, and that was important. We've been doing this for years. I've been part of InfraGard for many years, as far as I can remember, probably 2003, 2004. I became a member of InfraGard. Today, I'm a member of the board for the South Florida InfraGard. But before this came about in 2015, we've been doing this. The United States Secret Services with the Miami Electronic Crimes Task Force, the InfraGard, FBI, and the public sector and the private sector information sharing. But this gave a little bit of a bigger push to FS ISACs, or the financial sector ISAC, information sharing centers. So it's just to put it in paper and make sure that it's now enforceable. So that's why the regulators are coming and saying, okay, besides you're doing your risk assessment and besides you're doing these wonderful things, show me your commitment to threat intelligence and information sharing. And it not only, hey, if you do it and it's a check mark and it's good for you and you look good, good. I have nothing against it. But if you go a little bit further, what this guidance or what this regulation and what these regulators are asking is, are you taking advantage of this? There's very good information coming from this information sharing body. So I will tell you, it's overwhelming. Once you get to know what you're interested, somebody can run a script in your organization and highlight every time there's a big news that pretend to financial sector, wherever you are in whatever sector. um, More cybersecurity regulations. If you we talk about this during the class, but the New York State law. This was funny how this happens as a result of a breach or as a result of an incident. So the New York State was the first state that passed the law, and we all know it, DFS 23 Part 500, and it was the effective date was March 1st, 2017. Then, the regulators in the state of New York started saying, okay, listen, we're going to give a leadway. I know it's very aggressive. So we're going to give you 180 days. And they have a checklist of minimum things that they needed to comply with. And they said, listen, that's it. We give you a year is enough. By February 15th, all covered entities. And now covered entities means state charter banks, licensed lenders, private bankers, foreign licensed lenders or banks, mortgage companies, insurance companies, or service providers need to comply with this law. It's funny, I was in New York a couple of times doing talks about how you prepare and what are the expectation and what is this. At the end of the day, state of New York, said, well, listen, we're gonna put the brakes a little bit because we don't have enough auditors, people to support this audit. So you need to still comply and let us see how we're gonna go and do the audits. But this doesn't mean that we need to take a break here and it was off. No, no, no. This means you need to do all your due diligence. You need to document. You need to make sure that you follow this regulation because when something happens, pretty sure I'm telling you they're gonna come up and say you didn't follow this one. This one was halfway done. So get ready because this is important if you haven't already doing so. And and let me go back to that one more time because back then when we put this program together, the DFS 23 part 500 was big, was hot out of the oven. Everybody was running to comply with this if you had business in New York. But today, which I don't have a slide here, we are updating this one is GDPR, and I'm pretty sure some of you have questions for GDPR. And so again, state of Florida is getting ready to unveil their regulatory compliance for the state of Florida, very similar to the New York DFS, and other states are following the state of New York. So more regulation, more guidelines, more regulatory compliance that we have to do in our organizations. That's the main idea here. So moving on to what we need to know about regulations. So in policies, so the financial industry is significantly more targeted than any other industry because of the money. They follow the money, and the losses are huge. They being the cyber criminals. WannaCry, if you remember last year, the NSA, United States National Security Agency, misplaced, lost, or somebody compromised a set of tools that they use called Eternal Blue. And from Eternal Blue came this WannaCry, ransomware, if you would. It was geared towards older operating systems, Windows XP, and there were countries that suffered this the night before. I remember it was a Thursday, Friday morning, as I'm driving to work, I start hearing the news about this attack that happened in Europe and other countries. India was hit, their financial sector because most of their infrastructure was or is based on Windows XP. This was bad, bad. And I ask myself, and I ask all of you in the webinar, do you still have Windows XP machines on your environment? And if you do, what is your plan to migrate, what is your timeline. And this was announced last year. Yes, the NSA was working with Microsoft and worked with Microsoft to release a patch of an operating system was already, no longer supported, but they saw the need because the impact was so brutal and so bad in Europe that, Microsoft came out and said, listen, don't usually do this, but due to the sensitivity of this issue, we're gonna release a patch. I think patch number was MSN 1710, if I'm not mistaken. Why those numbers stick in my head because I had to do a lot of work that weekend, personally and helping other organizations, uh, colleagues, friends of mine, calling me all the, we spent probably 48 hours working on this and to mitigate and mitigate the risk and minimize it to organizations. Implications, we kind of know if you're in the financial sector, and the financial sector is heavily regulated. So the implications for compliance, you have to comply with federal, state, and international laws and regulations. So we're talking very complex. So many years ago, today is available. You do a Google search, but many years ago we struggle because we're following the international, the ISO standard 2700. Some of us were. Then came the regulator saying, no, 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 you need to follow our standard, which was based on NIST. And then you have, if you're a public company, yeah, you get auditors auditing you in COSO or COVID framework. And back then, today, again, do a Google search and you can find spreadsheets that, all the controls for each of the regulations, and it's easy to lay out. But back then it was difficult. So I ask you to please, if you haven't done it, if you need help, get a consultant that can help you map out all these controls. If you're following, any other framework, other different than the NIST, please do it because the last thing you want is to be cited or get an MRA or get any type of fines because you are not following the regulation. Remember, we all have to do the risk assessment. When the regulator comes, they're asking, where is your cyber security risk assessment? That is based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. So, if you tell them, well, I my security program is based on ISO 2700, they're gonna tell you, okay, so what? You've been telling you this since 2015. Get it going. More regulations and oversight for financial institutions, penalties for non-compliance, new requirements for institutions to invest in cybersecurity. And I have to applaud the financial industry, the regulators in this field. There are leading organizations into pushing top senior management of financial institutions in having a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, head and responsible for cybersecurity. This didn't happen a few years back. The term ISO came from the late 90s, early 2000s, where information security officer had the responsibility. But by doing this, the regulators and the United States government are making sure that that the person has the qualifications, the certifications, and most importantly, the experience to be the head of the cybersecurity programs, and also that the reporting line I saw back in the day when the security officer or manager or director reported 4 or 5 layers down, and he was kind of a supervisor with very little the ability to make decisions or enforce policies. So kudos in the financial sector is leading this, and I see more and more banks now shifting to CISO reporting to either chief risk officers or the CEO directly, and not also not reporting to the CIO, which could be seen sometimes as a conflict of interest, just because they're two different things. IT is doing the operational, and security is kind of doing the control unit. But for debate, I'm not the expert on this type of structures, but again, the message here is having a chief information security officer was one of the greatest things that the financial industry is pushing, has been pushing for. We have not new cybersecurity risk management practices that are required. So now another key point here, you named a CISO, but you now the CISO has this risk management practice because we woke up one day and say, hey, why don't we run security as part of risk management? As a risk management organization, you have more leverage. You have controls, you have enforcement, you have metrics that you can develop. So I liked it. I am a firm believer. I teach it. I practice it. Risk management is my favorite because there's nothing that you need to do other than what is the risk, what is the impact, what does that mean, what are the controls, what is the residual risk, and what compensating controls, if you don't have a control, can apply it, can you apply to, at the end of the day, how are you mitigating and monitoring the risk? That's all. um, Also, this regulation require qualified and well-trained resources. Again, kudos to regulators, kudos to companies and institutions and organizations that are following this, because you cannot sit a security analyst on in front of a computer and not train them. Cybersecurity is fast every day. We're adapting to new things. IoT, for instance, mobile devices, smart devices, and our workforce need to be trained accordingly. This is not just training for the security staff, but also for your organization as a whole need to be trained on the risk for the organization. Moving on with cybersecurity incident reporting, um, sometimes we said that we have information security incident response capabilities built. If that means that you have a document, okay, if that's what you said, we have a document, a policy or procedure. But I wanna push the envelope a little bit. How many times have you tested this plan? When do you test it? Who is involved in this cybersecurity testing? Um, and the answer is it has to be tested as often as you see fit, or at least once a year. But it has to be tested not different than when you test your BCP, your business continuity plan, because you need the resources to know what their role is and what they're supposed to do in the event of a cybersecurity incident. Uh, Experience, I take teams from different areas. We sit down and we have scenarios and hands-on, and what if a ransomware attack happened today and attacked this? What is the impact? Who do we communicate it? What's the escalation? What do we have? So real scenarios. And there's companies out there doing this type of help, uh, drafting the scenarios and helping you train your personnel to get to this. This should be second nature. This cannot be, where is the document? I don't know what I'm doing. This creates chaos, miscommunication, and then is when we make mistakes. So that's what you want to do. You don't want to make mistakes. Very similar to the hurricane season in South Florida. They start telling us in June 1st, very soon, it's coming. Have a plan, prepare, get your supplies, know what you're doing. And most of the times, last year with Irma, again, one more time, it was kind of different. But how were we prepared? Did our family know what to do, where to go? And that's something that I want to put out there. We do this almost every year at home. uh, Hopefully, why not do it in our current environments, in our organizations? So with that said, this is a high overview of an overview of what's going on, what we covered during this training, uh, what is our perspective on what is going on between the breaches, the laws, the regulations, the regulator itself, when they come to audit us, what is it that they are looking for or will be looking for? And remember, an audit is a snapshot of, in time, but that doesn't mean that the auditor can, depending on how big your organization is, but they can come back and say, hey, we want more details on this. We're gonna go deeper a little bit here or there. So have this training. What we're trying to do in this training is both operational and give you an idea of what the regulator is looking for, in what areas you need to concentrate, and help you kind of establish in a comparison when you come to our training, is my security program apart to what regulators are asking? Is my security program lacking some of the information that I need to provide? And we're going to go through what a security program looks like and where do I get that information. And you'll be surprised, is at your fingertips, because we often don't know, borrow from people. I need to write a policy. We go to Google, copy from somebody, and little did we know that what you put in a policy, you're gonna be measured per se. If you're not doing what your policy says, you're not doing your job. And we copy and paste thinking, oh, this is gonna look good. Stop. You have the answers. Business. I am a big believer that a IT is not, sorry, security is not an IT issue, is a business issue. And I preach this wherever I go. And as a business issue, we need to understand our business and meet with the business regularly and help them out understand regulations, processes, procedures, so they can support you. And on the other side, you can support them if you understand the business. So the training, let's go to the training now. The learning and training is a key. So we have the need for cybersecurity workforce. That was an executive order, as I mentioned before. Financial institutions must prove sufficient efforts to educate and train cybersecurity workforce. Sometimes I see some people struggling with, what did we do this year? Did we go to training? Did we attend? Hey, listen, there's thousands of webinars out there, thousands. You can also, an idea is, I've implemented this in a couple of places I worked, and with some people that I help, is I said, well, listen, we don't have money for training, perhaps, or we can't send the whole entire team to a training. How about if we bring a vendor every quarter? Vendor will be gladly, if you're doing business with them, I'm talking about probably your antivirus vendor, whomever it is, tell them, hey, can we, on this date, can you bring lunch and learn for 6 people in my department, for 10, for 12 people, and educate us in what you're seeing out there. What are the threats? What are the biggest issues? What do we need to look at that we probably are not familiar with? Believe me, this counts as a training, and also it creates a bond between you and your vendors. Last thing you want is you are in the middle of an issue, a security issue, and you need to contact somebody. Security, you already have their contact. They already know your environment. You already know who they are. So, good practice. Training is not only for IT; it's for all cybersecurity professionals. So please, one more time, don't think that because you're in cybersecurity, people sometimes think that we know it all, and we don't. So for IT and cybersecurity professionals, and the more we learn, the better prepared we are to avoid, manage, prevent, and mitigate cyber attacks. Um, Moving on. So what's this the learning outcomes of our training in June? We've got a lot of good feedback the first time we did this, and so we not only went back to the drawing board, listened to the feedback they were provided by the attendees, but also we want to make sure that this is something that is actionable, that the next day that you go back to your organization, you can say, listen, I have 5 key things that I need to look at and compare it according to what I saw yesterday. So it's not something that you're gonna go back and put on top of your desk and never look at it. So learning objectives, gain a full understanding of cybersecurity and a global threat landscape. What I showed you in the beginning was just a little teaser, but we're gonna dissect a couple of those, the latest attacks and cybersecurity breaches, because they were so so impactful, But I think if we would have paid attention a little bit of what we're lacking, it would have been prevented. So we're gonna go through that and give you an insight, and maybe you can take it back to your organizations and 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 talk to your leaders and do something about it. Learn about recent breaches and how these threats impact your work environments. Understand key concepts of cybersecurity regulations. We're gonna go and look at the FFIEC guidance. A lot of the banks and institutions that have to comply with FFIEC guidelines sometimes don't even bother to go and read the guidelines before the regulators come in. So to understand what is the expectation, what are the key components of your security program, and by the way, just in case you don't know, a plug here for the FFIEC book that has just recently been updated. In the back of that book is the regulator, the examiner guidelines, and go look at those. Yeah, you know when they come in, what they're gonna ask you. So prepare yourself. It's like being in school and you have that final review, the final exam. You review it, and then you go and take the exam. You pass it. So take it. My advice is start looking at this. We're gonna look at the presidential orders and the impact to of these presidential orders and the New York State cyber security laws, and we're gonna sprinkle a little bit here, a little bit of the GDPR. I'm gonna tell you what the big fuss is about. What do you have to do to prepare? What assessments you need to complete to be in a better place and not wait for something to happen to you if you are required to comply with the law. We're going to incorporate one of the key program objectives is incorporate key elements to manage threats and to make your incident response program more effective. We're gonna have a tabletop case study exercise that is absolutely amazing. And I'm gonna leave it at that because we had a very nice discussion last time in over the course of this past 6 months, 8 months. I still getting emails from people that sat here in the course, remembering everything that we taught them, how they went and applied it and be prepared. Discover ways to regulate risk management in all areas, participate and learn about practical guidance to apply it in financial organizations. So it's more practical. Um, Again, it's gonna be a day that you're gonna be here with, one Sergio is Sergio Pinon is the CISO for Ocean Bank, a good friend, my colleague, very knowledgeable. So you have him and you have me to ask questions about 35 years, and Sergio's bio is impressive as well. So the curriculum, in day one, we're gonna look at an introduction into the threat actors, and the impact of the breaches. In module two, we're gonna look at cybersecurity laws and regulations. In module three, we're gonna look at practical experience, case studies, and best practices. As a matter of fact, in module three, we're gonna introduce you to a hands-on cybersecurity framework risk assessment. We're gonna give you a template. We're gonna walk you through how to do this and how to, look at these assessments. So it's 1 day program, June 28th to be exact. I think I said June 26th before. Just want to make sure I said it correctly. Is 1 day program on June 28th. It's offered in at FIBA Training Center, and is is this program is geared to professionals in the financial institutions, and professionals could be security, risk management, IT, compliance. We talk about cybersecurity, and I think this should be geared towards the whole entire organization and people who really care about their security programs. So, with that said, I want to know if we have some time for. Are there any questions in the queue that I could answer? Is anybody posted a question or wants to ask a question? We only have a few minutes, but I'll do my best to answer in 3 more minutes. I can I see that? Okay. Give me 1 minute. Technical difficulties here, so I wanna look at the question. Okay, don't see it. Okay, guess not. Oh, do you have some information about cybersecurity? Oh, yes. Oh, if I forgot to say it, please forgive me. Yes, we do. So I'm currently doing a study. Actually, currently not. I did some study in Latin America with the OAS, and for Central and South America, that's La OEA, and where we looked at the impact of cybersecurity. And so, yes, I have some data and some information that I do provide on the current stance by country, by regulations. A little bit more complex than the United States, because if you can imagine, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina, they're leading. But yes, we do. I have information from Costa Rica, Panama, and other countries in Central America that we can look at. That was a good question. Do I have time for one more? No? Okay. Hold on 1 second. Let me see. Next question. Okay. It's coming up. I apologize. Okay. Not sure if it was said before, but what is the cost of 1 day program? So you can find the information at the FIBA website. I don't want to mislead you. I know different prices can be, but I'm not the right person to answer that question. But you can submit your question to FIBA directly, and somebody will provide the information. Please repeat the place where we can find the regulators audit guidance. Okay, that's interesting. FFIEC. Could you, if I could type it? So FFIEC. Do a Google search and look for the handbook. It's called the Security Handbook. Okay, they're telling me the price for FIBA members to attend the 1 day class is $595, and non-members is $695. I hope that answered your questions. I think we ran out of time. I hope this was insightful and interesting to all of you. I hope that I could see you here during the June 28th class. And if you have any questions, please direct them to FIBA. I'd be glad to answer, or me, they're directed to me. Thank you so much. Do appreciate it.